Schistosomiasis by Gloria Coder and Rebecca Roche.
Schistosomiasis affects over 200 million people in the world today. The World Health Organization estimates that it causes at least 200,000 deaths each year. The morbidity rate is much higher. We are focusing on Richard Toll, a small city on the banks of the Senegal River. In 1 year, the rate of schistosomiasis in Richard Toll went from 2% to 72%. This enormous jump immediately makes you question, why? The answer lies in the construction of the Diama Dam. The dam was built to separate the salty ocean water from the fresh water in the Senegal River for cultivation purposes. Unfortunately, this also prevented a local prawn from migrating to the estuary to lay its eggs. This prawn is the natural predator of the freshwater snail that acts as a temporary host for schistosomiasis. When the prawn began to die from old age without a younger population replacing it, the rate of schistosomiasis exploded. Schistosomiasis is a parasitic disease that relies on a temporary host. Fresh water becomes contaminated when infected animals and humans urinate or defecate and then release parasitic eggs in or near water sources. The eggs hatch and the larvae find freshwater river snails as a temporary host. The larvae leave the snails and swim freely in the water. When people come in contact with the infected water, the larvae enters the skin. Inside its human host, it develops into worms. Male and female worms can live together in the blood vessels for decades. They are typically found in the intestinal tract or the urogenital region. The female worm is longer, but the male is much wider, and the female worm actually lives inside of the male for most of her life. Each female worm can release thousands of eggs. The host excretes them, and the cycle of infection continues. However, most of these eggs remain in the host's body. Significant and potentially fatal complications arise from the body's response to the eggs. The current response towards schistosomiasis is to treat as many infected people with medication as possible. However, this is only placing a band-aid on the problem. Reinfection will continue unless we manage to control the river snail population. The risks of not addressing this disease are significant. Common symptoms include infertility, miscarriages, stillbirth, low birth weight babies, anemia, malnutrition, reduced growth, diminished cognitive abilities, blood in the urine, genital lesions, distended abdomen, abdominal pain, blood in the stool, constipation, diarrhea. Sometimes the liver and or spleen are enlarged. Kidney damage and or bladder cancer may occur. Newborns may be born with the disease since the parasites can be passed through the placenta. Schistosomiasis may also increase the host's susceptibility to secondary infections, such as malaria and HIV/AIDS. The resulting infection is often more severe. Children are much more susceptible to infection.
Solving schistosomiasis. This is the intervention. The first thing that we want to do is to prevent this disease from reinfecting people, and that's to cure the disease where it begins. The river snail is the host of this disease, and we want to eliminate the host. Eliminating the host will eliminate the parasite that carries the disease. So, what is the solution, and how will we eliminate the host? Well, here it is. We want to reintroduce native river prawns into the local river. This is a natural predator of the snails who will consume snails for the calcium benefit that they need in order to grow. The male prawns will be selected along with neo-females that will only produce males. Males have several advantages over females. They tend to not migrate, which will keep them in the local area, and males can grow to a larger size, which means they will consume more snails than the females. Now, how are we going to accomplish this? First, we're going to meet with the village leaders. We will discuss any concerns or issues that they might have and get their input on carrying out the plan. We will also involve the people with ownership and caring for the water and teach them how all of this can help them to be healthier by eliminating the disease. The most important part of this plan, though, is to educate everyone, including the children. Different levels of educational materials are available for adults and children, including comic books that are put out by the WHO, the World Health Organization. Materials will be printed in their native language, along with education being given to the leaders first, then having the leaders teach others. It is important to also note that the villagers know this disease by more lay terms, such as bilharzia and snail river fever. They need to avoid contact with a river during this time. It's important that they have as little contact with the water until the prawns have eaten the majority of the snails. The villagers use the river to wash clothes, go to the bathroom in, or just play. One of the ways that we can dissuade them from going in the water is to put up some signs to remind them not to go in during the program and to provide them some alternatives to their water source. Here they are just playing and washing in the river. Some of the temporary ways that we can help them avoid exposure to the infected water are: number one, here, using the 3-pot method. You have 3 containers and each one needs to sit for a minimum of 48 hours in order to kill the parasites in the snail host. The water is then safe to use and drink. And here's a diagram that kind of explains that process. The next thing that we can do is to provide some hand water pumps that will have flexible tubing that can extend into the river, and the other side extends into a jug or water container. By using this, they'll be able to avoid going to the river when they need to gather water. The third thing we will do is we will partner with a group called raincatchers.org to install rainwater catchment systems that will also provide them with additional clean water and storage. What is some of the equipment that we're going to need for this operation? Well, we will need some netting, some stakes, some weights to keep the netting on the bottom, and of course some prawns. Here's a picture of the pilot program enclosure to the village water river source. As you can see, there's a large portion that's netted off with a fine netting that still allows water through, and access from the bank is still accessible. Here's a picture of a young prawn from a hatchery. We want to stock the lake with young prawns so that they will eat more. So, how are we going to sustain this project? Well, teaching the people to know what size the prawns are when they're market size is one of the things. And this takes about 6 months for them to get this big. We need to teach them about safe harvesting. And one way to harvest safely is to cast the nets from a boat, as we see here in this picture. Another way to provide them with a safe way to harvest the prawns is to provide them with waders and hand nets so that they are able to do land harvesting. And here's another net that can be cast out of a boat. Restocking the river with prawns can become expensive due to transportation costs and issues. So we need to keep this cycle going in order to keep the snails from returning. One of the ways that this can be achieved is through the establishment of a continual cycle of stocking the river, harvesting the prawns, and raising young prawns through an aquaculture program. Here is a picture of a tank holding young prawns as they grow large enough to be transferred to the river in order to do their job. Part of this process will be to hire and train local residents to farm prawns for restocking the river. And how will all of this benefit the community? The water will be disease-free, allowing them to have safe access without fear. Their economy will benefit through new jobs created for prawn farming. The harvest can be sold at local markets at 5 times the price of the local fish, thus increasing their income. And the prawns can be eaten with no transmission of the disease, thus adding more protein to their diet. Concerns, barriers, and conclusions. Let's take a look at these. Some of the concerns that the people had during the pilot program are: how are they going to get the water out of the river safely? Where are they going to wash their clothes and get rid of their dirty water? Can they still launch their boats without disturbing the nets? How are we going to keep the people from using the water for sanitary reasons? Are the prawns really safe to eat? And how do you tell when they're ready to harvest? Well, these concerns were addressed very well in the pilot programs, and we can take guidance from what they learned and what worked well. We have provided alternatives to the villagers so they don't have to have contact with water in order to collect it. We've provided, for example here, the hand pump and also water collection containers. Washing of the clothes will be done away from the river along with a cesspool to dump the dirty water in. That way the prawns can grow up in cleaner water. The launching of boats will not be a problem. Accommodation for this can be in the plan before the enclosure is placed into the water. Signs will be posted to encourage the people not to go in the water, and education and use of the latrine facilities will be encouraged. The digestion process of the prawns will be explained to include how the parasites are destroyed, making the prawns safe to eat. Market-sized prawn props will be available to show the approximate size of harvestable prawns, and measurements can be compared to household items or places on the forearm for approximation. Some of the barriers we can expect to encounter are: how can we gain cooperation with the local population with the language and cultural differences that exist? What's the best way to educate the people regarding the disease in the prawn solution? How can we encourage the locals to avoid the water until it's safe? Where will the funding come from? How many prawns will we need for the initial stocking? And how are we going to transport those prawns? Well, cooperation begins with meeting with the village leaders and with partnering with agencies already in the area, such as Child Fund. Child Funds is already established in the area. They have health program districts. They're able to distribute medication and can help with contacts with the community leaders who we can teach, and then they can teach others. And we can post signs in French along with pictures to help. For education, we'll take our clues from previous successful education guides that are available through the WHO and Project Crevette and use them for education of the local people. We will use signs to remind people not to go in the water and have people encourage others not to use the water if they see them trying to go that way. The funding for the program will be sought out from many different organizations, taking guidance from the successful Project Crevette. They will also be able to assist us in the amount of prawns needed for initial stocking and for transportation of them. Some of the conclusions that we've come to is that the information from these pilot studies will be instrumental for success. Partnership with other organizations is a must to help with funding, connections, language, and cultural solutions. The village must be involved and invested in making and maintaining these lifestyle changes in order to eliminate the disease. This is a continual process that must be maintained in order to prevent reoccurrence. Here are just some of the partners that we plan to reach out to in order to get their advice, their guidance, and financial support in order to make this program a success. And here's a cute little cartoon I wanted to share with you. It says, "Hasta la vista, Valeria," and it has our prawn on the motorcycle, the little snail saying, "Oh crap," and it says, "This is a Terminator who might be responsible for saving human features." Hope you've enjoyed our little presentation. Goodbye.